No one wants to marry me. My neighbor said those 5 words while sitting on the hallway floor outside apartment 4D at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, mascara streaking down her face, still wearing her elementary school teacher clothes like she'd been too broken to even change. Claire Bennett, 28 years old, the woman who watered the hallway plants every Saturday morning, the woman I'd watched through careful distance for 18 months, looked up at me with gray eyes that had seen too much loss for someone so young and repeated it like a death sentence. No one wants to marry me, Derek. I'm Derek Sullivan, 34-year-old pediatric oncology nurse, widower, the neighbor in 4C who'd been in love with her since the day she moved in. And standing there with mail clutched in my white-knuckled hands, watching the woman I loved fall apart, I heard myself say the 2 words I'd been holding back for months. I do. I do want to marry you, Claire. I do. She stared at me like I'd just shot her instead of proposed. Her whole body went rigid. Her breathing stopped. And then, she did the one thing I never expected. She ran, not metaphorically, not emotionally. She literally scrambled to her feet, fumbled her keys with shaking hands, and ran into her apartment like I was something dangerous, something terrifying, something she had to escape. The door slammed, the lock clicked, and I heard her crying on the other side, loud and broken and full of something that sounded less like relief and more like panic. I stood there in the empty hallway, my proposal hanging in the air like smoke, and I couldn't understand it. Why would a woman who just said no one wants to marry her run from the man who said, I do? What did Claire Bennett know about marriage, about me, about herself, that made my love feel like a threat instead of an answer? But here's what she didn't know. What I hadn't told her in 18 months of hallway conversations and Saturday morning coffee and carefully maintained distance. I already knew her secret. The reason she believed no one wants to marry her. The cancer, the infertility, the 4 failed relationships that ended when she told them the truth. I knew all of it. Because 6 years ago, I was the oncology nurse who held my dying wife's hand in the same cancer center where Claire Bennett was fighting for her life. I recognized her the day she moved in. I'd been loving her, knowing exactly what she'd survived, knowing exactly why she thought she was unmarriageable, knowing exactly what I was signing up for. And I'd said, I do, anyway. But she ran. So why would a woman who thinks no one wants to marry her run from a man who knows her worst secret and wants her anyway? What was Claire so afraid of that my proposal sent her fleeing instead of falling into my arms? And what was I about to discover about my neighbor that would make me understand why sometimes the cruelest thing you can tell someone who thinks they're unlovable is that you love them? I could still hear her crying through the door. The mail I'd been holding fell from my hands, scattering across the worn carpet, bills and junk and a wedding invitation from my cousin that I'd already decided not to attend because going to weddings alone felt like failure. My fist raised to knock on her door, hovering there in the stale hallway air that smelled like old carpet and someone's dinner from 3 floors down. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the sound of her voice through the door, muffled but clear enough. Why would he say that? Why would he lie to me like that? She thought I was lying. She thought my proposal was pity or kindness or some cruel joke the universe was playing on her heart. She thought no one could actually want to marry her, so when someone said they did, it had to be fake. I lowered my hand and did something I never do. I sat down on that hallway floor, right outside her door, back against the wall, and I stayed. The building hummed around me, someone's TV playing too loud on the 2nd floor, a couple arguing in 3B about who forgot to buy milk. Normal sounds in a normal building where 2 people were having the most abnormal moment of their lives, separated by 3 inches of cheap apartment door. I know you can hear me, I said, not shouting, just talking at normal volume because I knew she was right there on the other side. And I know you think I'm lying. But I'm not going anywhere, Claire. I'm going to sit right here until you believe me. The crying stopped. I heard movement, the soft sound of her sliding down the door to sit on her side of it. We were back to back now, separated by wood and locks and fear, but closer than we'd been in months. You don't know what you're saying, her voice came through, shaky and small. You don't know what you'd be getting into. I'm a pediatric oncology nurse, I said to the empty hallway. I watch kids fight cancer every single day. I hold their hands. During chemo, I distract them during spinal taps. I've seen every complication, every side effect, every terrible thing the treatment does to a body. You think I don't know what medical complications look like? Silence from her side. I know what cancer takes from people, Claire. I know about the surgeries and the scars and the things you lose that you can never get back. I know all of it. Then you should know better than to want to marry someone like me, she said, and her voice carried something that made my chest hurt. Not sadness. Shame. Someone like you, I repeated. You mean someone who's kind and thoughtful and waters plants that aren't even hers because she sees something that needs care, and she cares anyway? Someone who teaches children and comes home exhausted but still smiles when she sees me in the hallway? Someone who survived something that would have broken most people and kept living anyway? Someone who can't give you children, she said flatly. Someone who can't carry a pregnancy, someone whose body is broken in ways that matter. There it was, the core of it, the reason she ran. My wife died of cancer, I said, and I heard her breath catch on the other side of the door. 6 years ago, we'd been married for 3 years. We were planning to start a family. And then she got sick, and she died, and I never got to have children with her either. The silence that followed felt heavy. So if you think I'm going to walk away from you because you can't have biological children, you're wrong. I already grieved that loss once. I already made peace with the fact that my life might not look like the picture I imagined. And I'm telling you right now, sitting on this dirty hallway floor at midnight, that I would rather have a life with you and no children than a life with anyone else and a dozen kids. Derek. Her voice broke on my name. I mean it, I said. Every word. I've been in love with you for 18 months, Claire, since the day you moved in and nearly hit me with that watering can. Since that night you sat in this hallway and told me about your student with cancer, and I saw how much you cared, despite how much it hurt you to care. Since every Saturday morning when I watch you tend to those plants like they matter, like caring about small things in a hard world is the most important thing you can do. I heard her shifting, heard what might have been her hand touching the door, like she was trying to reach through it. But I don't understand why you ran, I admitted. I told you I want to marry you, that I don't care about the things you think make you unmarriageable, and you looked at me like I was the scariest thing you'd ever seen. So help me understand, Claire. Why did telling you I love you make you run? The lock clicked. My heart stopped. The door opened slowly, and there she was, sitting on her side of the threshold in pajamas now, eyes swollen and red, looking at me with something in her expression. He couldn't read. Not fear anymore, not shame, something else entirely. Because you're the third person to propose to me, she said quietly, and the other two took it back. The world tilted. What? I've been proposed to twice before, Claire said, and her voice was steady now, controlled, like she'd rehearsed this speech in her head 1,000 times. The first time, I was 25, 1 year after treatment ended. He proposed on a beach at sunset, big romantic gesture, ring and everything, and then I told him about the cancer, about the infertility, about my frozen eggs and the fact that I'd need a surrogate if we wanted biological children. And 3 days later, he gave the ring back and said he'd made a mistake, that he wasn't ready for that kind of complication. My hands curled into fists. The second time, I was 26. He knew about the cancer from the beginning. Said it didn't matter. Proposed 6 months into dating. I said yes. We started planning a wedding. And then his mother found out, and she sat him down and explained all the reasons why marrying a cancer survivor was a bad investment. Medical bills, potential recurrence, the fertility issues, the way it would complicate their family planning. And he called off the engagement 2 months before the wedding. Claire, so when you said, "I do" tonight, when you stood there in this hallway and told me you wanted to marry me, all I could think was, how long until he takes it back? How long until Derek realizes what he's actually offering to sign up for and decides it's too much? How long until I start planning a life with someone who says they love me despite everything, only to watch them leave when they realize, despite everything, is harder than they thought? She wiped her face with her sleeve. I ran because staying and believing you felt more dangerous than running and protecting myself. Because I can't survive having another man look me in the eyes and say I'm worth marrying, only to take it back when reality sets in. I can't do it again, Derek. I can't. I looked at this woman I loved, this woman who'd been proposed to twice and abandoned twice, this woman who'd learned that I do from a man's mouth meant I don't when reality hit. And I understood. She didn't run because she didn't want me. She ran because she wanted me too much. And wanting things that get taken away was the most dangerous thing she knew. I'm not taking it back, I said. You say that now. I'm not taking it back, I repeated, and I moved closer, close enough that our knees were almost touching across the threshold of her apartment. And I'm going to prove it to you, not with words, because words have failed you before, but with time, with showing up, with staying even when it's hard, with being the person who doesn't run when you tell me your worst fears. Claire shook her head. You don't have to prove anything. You don't owe me anything just because I'm broken. You're not broken. I cut her off, and my voice came out harder than I meant. You survived, there's a difference. And the men who proposed and took it back, they didn't deserve you in the first place, but I'm not them, Claire. And I'm going to show you that. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face for something. A lie, maybe. A crack in my certainty. Some sign that I was going to change my mind. Why? She finally asked. Why do you want to marry someone you think is going to spend the whole relationship waiting for you to leave? And that's when I knew I had to tell her, had to risk everything on the truth I'd been holding back for 18 months. Because I already know you, I said slowly. I've known you longer than you think. Her face went pale. What does that mean? 6 years ago, I worked at Memorial Cancer Center. I was there the same time you were getting treatment. I saw you in the waiting room, Claire. I saw you crying in the hallway after a bad scan. I saw you being wheeled into surgery. I didn't treat you directly. You had a different oncology team, but I saw you. And I remembered you when you moved in next door because I never forget my patients' faces, even the ones I didn't personally care for. Claire's hand went to her mouth. So when I said I know what cancer takes from people, I didn't just mean professionally. I mean, I watched you survive it. I watched you fight through something that would have destroyed most people. I watched my wife die from the same disease you beat, and when you moved in next door, I recognized you immediately. You knew? Her voice came out strangled. This whole time you knew who I was? Yes. And you didn't tell me? No. Why not? I took a breath. Because I didn't want you to think I was only interested in you because of the cancer connection. I didn't want you to feel like I saw you as my second chance at saving someone I couldn't save the first time. I wanted you to know me, to trust me, to let me in. As Derek the neighbor, not Derek the nurse who remembers you from the worst time of your life. Claire stood up fast, backing away from the doorway. So this whole time, our coffee dates and hallway conversations, and you shoveling my parking spot, you were what? Observing me, studying me, feeling sorry for the cancer patient who survived? No, I stood too. I was falling in love with you. You don't fall in love with someone you've been lying to for 18 months. I didn't lie, I said. I just didn't tell you something I probably should have, but everything else was real, Claire. Every conversation, every moment, every feeling, all of it was real. She stared at me, and I watched a dozen emotions cross her face. Betrayal, confusion, anger, something that might have been hope fighting against fear. I need you to leave, she finally said. My heart cracked. Claire, I need you to leave, she repeated, firmer now. I need to think. I need to process the fact that my neighbor who just proposed to me has actually been watching me for 18 months, knowing things about my medical history that I didn't tell him. I need you to go, Derek. Please. I wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that knowing her from the cancer center wasn't creepy or calculated. It was just the painful coincidence of two people whose lives had been touched by the same disease crossing paths again. Wanted to tell her that I'd fallen in love with who she was now, not who she'd been in that treatment chair. But she was asking me to leave. And the one thing I'd promised was to prove I could stay when things got hard. And sometimes staying means respecting when someone needs space. Okay, I said. I'll go. But I meant what I said, Claire. I'm not taking it back. I'm not those other men. And when you're ready to talk again, I'll be right next door. I walked to my apartment, unlocked my door, and went inside. And then I did something I hadn't done since Sarah died. I cried. Not because Claire had asked me to leave, but because I'd finally told her the truth, and the truth had hurt her instead of freeing her. Because I loved a woman who'd been taught that love comes with conditions and expiration dates. Because I'd proposed to someone who couldn't believe anyone would actually want to marry her. And then I'd proven her fears right by revealing I'd been keeping secrets. I'd told her I wasn't taking it back. But as I sat in my dark apartment listening to the silence from next door, I wondered if it mattered. Because how do you prove to someone that you'll stay when they've spent years learning that everyone eventually leaves? 3 days passed and Claire didn't leave her apartment. I know because I listened for her. Listened for the sound of her door opening at 6:45 a.m. for work. Listened for her footsteps in the hallway. Listened for the Saturday morning ritual of watering the plants that she'd maintained for 18 months without fail. Nothing. The plants started wilting by Friday. The fern on the east windowsill drooped, leaves turning brown at the edges. The succulent she'd placed in the corner looked dull, lifeless. Every morning I walked past them going to work, and every morning they looked worse, and every morning I wanted to water them myself, but I didn't because those were Claire's plants, Claire's ritual, Claire's way of caring for something in a building that nobody else cared about. And if I took that from her, even to help, it felt like I was saying she couldn't come back from this. On Thursday night, I came home from a 14-hour shift, lost another kid, a 6-year-old named Marcus who'd fought neuroblastoma for 2 years and died holding his mother's hand, asking if heaven had dogs. And I found myself standing outside Claire's door before I realized I was there. No sound from inside, no light under the door, just silence that felt heavier than it should. I almost knocked, almost pressed my hand to that door and asked if she was okay, asked if she was eating, asked if she needed anything. But the last thing she'd said to me was, "I need you to leave." And I'd promised to respect that. So instead, I left groceries outside her door. Not a note, not an explanation, just the basics I'd noticed she always bought. Greek yogurt, strawberries, that expensive granola she liked, the tea that smelled like vanilla, and something floral that I'd learned to recognize as her scent. I left them there and went inside my apartment and wondered if she'd even take them. An hour later, I heard her door open, heard the rustle of bags being picked up, heard her door close again. She'd taken them. It wasn't much, but it was something. Friday morning, I watered the hallway plants before work. I'd held out as long as I could, but watching them die felt like watching her give up, and I couldn't do it. So I filled her watering can from the janitor's closet and I gave them what they needed, and I told myself it was just plants, just keeping something alive, not a metaphor for anything else. But it felt like a metaphor. I was getting into my truck to leave for my shift when I saw her mother's car pull into the parking lot. Patricia Bennett. I'd seen her twice before, both times when she'd visited Claire on Sundays. Tall woman, late 50s, dressed like she was about to attend a funeral even when she was just visiting her daughter. She had Claire's gray eyes, but none of Claire's warmth, just this cold assessment in the way she looked at the world, like she was constantly disappointed by what she found. She got out of her car carrying a large manila envelope and walked straight to the building entrance without seeing me. I sat in my truck and watched her disappear inside, and something in my gut twisted. This wasn't a casual visit. I should have left for work, should have minded my own business, respected Claire's space, done what I'd promised and given her room to think. But I'd worked with enough families in crisis to recognize the body language of someone delivering bad news. I got out of my truck and followed her inside. By the time I reached the third-floor landing, I could hear the yelling. "You can't just hide in this apartment forever, Claire." Patricia's voice carried through the thin walls like a whip crack. "I'm not hiding, Mom, I'm processing." Claire's voice, quieter, tired, but with steel underneath. "Processing what? The fact that your neighbor propositioned you? Claire, the man is clearly unstable. Proposing to someone he barely knows? That's not romantic, that's concerning." I stopped on the stairs. I should have kept walking. Should have gone to work, should have let Claire handle this alone. But something kept me frozen there, listening. He didn't proposition me, Claire said. He proposed. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like your neighbor took advantage of you having an emotional breakdown to insert himself into your life in a completely inappropriate way. That's not what happened. Then explain it to me, Patricia cut her off. Explain why a man you've known for 18 months suddenly decides he wants to marry you the moment you're vulnerable and crying in a hallway. What does he want from you, Claire? Because men don't just propose out of nowhere without an agenda. Silence from Claire's side. That's what I thought, Patricia continued, and I could hear her moving around, probably pacing Claire's small living room the way she did when she was building to something. Which is why I brought these. What are those? Applications, Patricia said. For the surrogate program at the fertility clinic. I've already contacted 3 agencies. With your frozen eggs, we can start the process immediately. You can still have biological children, Claire. You can still have a normal family. You just need to stop sabotaging yourself by settling for men who clearly have ulterior motives. Ulterior motives, Claire repeated, and her voice had gone flat. You think Derek proposed because he has ulterior motives. I think Derek proposed because he saw an opportunity, Patricia said bluntly. You're vulnerable, you're lonely, you've convinced yourself nobody wants to marry you. Along comes your neighbor with a hero complex, and suddenly he's your savior? Claire, you're smarter than this. You don't know him. I don't need to know him to see the pattern, Patricia interrupted. This is exactly what happened with Brian. He said all the right things, made you feel special, proposed, and then left the moment things got complicated. At least Derek is showing his true colors early by making a proposal he clearly hasn't thought through. I should have walked away, should have let Claire defend me or not defend me, should have respected her space and her privacy and the boundary I'd promised to maintain. But hearing someone call my proposal a manipulation tactic, hearing Claire's mother reduce the most honest thing I'd ever said to an agenda, made something snap inside me. I knocked on Claire's door. The conversation inside stopped immediately. Claire, I called. It's Derek. I know I said I'd give you space, but I can hear your mother through the walls and I need to say something. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened. Claire stood there in sweatpants and one of those oversized sweaters she wore when she was trying to disappear, looking exhausted and fragile, and like she hadn't slept since Tuesday. Behind her, Patricia stood with her arms crossed, holding those manila envelopes like weapons. Mr. Sullivan, Patricia said, my name crisp and cold. How convenient that you're eavesdropping on a private conversation. The walls are thin, I said evenly. I wasn't trying to listen. But I heard what you said about my proposal, and I need to correct something. You don't need to do anything, Claire started, but I held up a hand. Your mother thinks I proposed because I have an agenda, I said, looking directly at Patricia. She thinks I took advantage of your vulnerability, that I have ulterior motives, that I'm some kind of opportunist inserting myself into your life. Patricia's chin lifted. If you heard all that, then you heard correctly. I did have an agenda, I admitted, and I saw Claire's face go pale. I've had an agenda for 18 months. The agenda was to make your daughter smile when she looked sad, to make sure she ate when she came home too tired to cook, to shovel her parking spot before she woke up because I wanted her to have one less hard thing in her day. My agenda was to fall in love with the kindest, strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever met, and hope that someday she might fall in love with me too. Patricia's expression didn't change. Pretty words. I'm sure Brian had pretty words too. I'm not Brian, I said. I'm not whatever other men have failed her. I'm Derek Sullivan, and I'm the man who wants to marry your daughter knowing exactly what that means. I know about the cancer. I know about the infertility. I know about the frozen eggs and the surrogate option and the medical complications and all of it. Claire's breath caught. You told him? Patricia turned to Claire, accusatory. You told your neighbor your private medical information? He already knew, Claire said quietly, and her eyes were locked on mine. He knew before I told him. He was there. Patricia frowned. What does that mean, he was there? 6 years ago, I said, still looking at Claire. I was an oncology nurse at Memorial Cancer Center. I worked the same floor where your daughter was getting treatment. I didn't treat her directly, but I saw her. I remembered her. and when she moved in next door 18 months ago, I recognized her immediately." The color drained from Patricia's face. "You've been stalking my daughter." "I've been loving her," I corrected. "There's a difference. I didn't approach her because of the cancer connection. I didn't manipulate her into conversations. I just lived next door and watched her be kind to plants and students and strangers, and I fell in love with who she is now, not who she was in that treatment chair." "This is insane," Patricia said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "Claire, tell me you see how insane this is." Claire didn't answer her mother. She was looking at me with those gray eyes that had haunted me for 18 months, and I couldn't read what I saw there. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she finally asked. "If you recognized me, if you knew everything, why wait 18 months to say something?" "Because I was afraid," I admitted. "Afraid you'd think exactly what your mother thinks, that I had ulterior motives, that I was using the cancer connection to manipulate you, that I saw you as a second chance at saving someone instead of just you. I wanted you to know me first, trust me first, let me in as your neighbor before I complicated it with history." "That's not your decision to make," Claire said, and there was heat in her voice now. "You don't get to decide what I can handle knowing. You don't get to manage my feelings by withholding information." "You're right," I said immediately. "You're absolutely right. I should have told you sooner. I should have been honest from the beginning. But Claire, I need you to understand. The feelings were real. The proposal was real. None of it was manipulation. It was just a man who fell in love with his neighbor and didn't know how to tell her he'd been carrying that love for months." Patricia made a disgusted sound. "This is exactly the kind of emotional manipulation I'm talking about." "Mom, stop!" Claire held up a hand without looking away from me. "Just stop!" Then she turned to her mother. "I need you to leave." Patricia's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "I need you to leave," Claire repeated. "Take your surrogate applications and your judgments about Derek and your opinions about my life, and I need you to go." "Claire, I'm trying to protect you." "No," Claire said, and her voice was stronger now, clearer. "You're trying to control me. You're trying to fix something you think is broken, because you can't accept that maybe I'm okay with my life not looking like the picture you wanted for me. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you're not okay. You haven't left your apartment in 3 days. Because I'm processing," Claire cut her off. "Because something complicated happened and I needed time to think about it without you showing up with solutions to problems I didn't ask you to solve." Patricia looked between us, her face flushed. "So what? You're choosing him? A man who's been lying to you for 18 months? "I'm choosing myself," Claire said. "I'm choosing to figure out my own feelings without you telling me what they should be. I'm choosing to have a conversation with Derek that doesn't include you standing there calling him manipulative when you don't know anything about him." She walked to her door and opened it. "I love you, Mom, but I need you to leave. Now." Patricia grabbed her purse and the manila envelopes, walked to the door with her spine rigid, and stopped next to Claire. "When this falls apart, and it will fall apart, don't come crying to me about how I didn't warn you." Then she left, heels clicking down the hallway, and the door closed behind her with a soft click. Claire and I stood there in her small living room, surrounded by the silence her mother had left behind, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Claire looked at me and said the last thing I expected. "Tell me about your wife. Tell me about your wife." Claire stood in the middle of her living room, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding something in, and waited for me to answer the question I'd been avoiding for 6 years. I sat down on her couch, and after a moment, she sat too. Not next to me. On the chair across from me, maintaining distance, maintaining control. "Her name was Sarah," I started, and saying her name out loud to Claire felt like opening a door I'd kept locked. "We met in college, married at 25, had 3 years together before the diagnosis. Ovarian cancer, same as yours. Stage 4 by the time they found it." Claire's hands tightened in her lap. "She died 8 months after diagnosis," I continued. "We never got to have children, never got to buy a house or take that trip to Italy she wanted or do any of the things we'd planned. Cancer took all of it." "I'm sorry," Claire whispered. "I was her nurse," I said. "Not officially. I wasn't assigned to her case because of conflict of interest. But I was there every day. I held her hand during chemo. I researched every treatment option. I stayed up nights reading medical journals trying to find something, anything that might save her. And none of it mattered. She died anyway. I looked at Claire now, really looked at her. You were getting treatment the same time she was dying. Different floor, different team, but same building. And I remember seeing you in the waiting room one day, crying after a scan, looking terrified and alone. And I remember thinking, that woman is fighting the same thing that's killing my wife, and she's fighting alone. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I didn't approach you then. Wouldn't have been appropriate. But I remembered your face. And when you moved in next door 18 months ago, I recognized you immediately, recognized you as the woman who survived what my wife didn't. Is that why you wanted to marry me? Claire asked, and her voice shook. Because I'm your second chance at saving someone? No, I said firmly. That's what I was afraid you'd think. That's why I didn't tell you. Because I knew it would sound like I was trying to fix something broken in me by being with you. But Claire, that's not what this is. I leaned forward. I loved Sarah. I'll always love Sarah. She was my first love, my first wife, my first everything. But she's gone. And I spent 2 years after she died thinking I was done, that I'd had my chance at love and it ended, and I should be grateful I got those 3 years instead of asking for more. What changed? Claire whispered. You watering those hallway plants, I said. That first Saturday morning when I saw you tending to something nobody else cared about, something that wasn't even yours, just because it needed caring for. That's when I realized I wasn't done. That's when I realized grief doesn't mean you stop living. It just means you carry loss with you while you keep going. Claire wiped her eyes. I fell. In love with you because you're kind and strong and you survived something terrible and kept being kind anyway? I fell in love with you because you care about your students and strangers and plants and everything you touch, you make better. I fell in love with you because looking at you doesn't remind me of loss. It reminds me that surviving matters, that being alive matters, that love after loss is possible. But I can't give you children, Claire said. I can't give you the family you lost with Sarah. I don't want you to be Sarah, I said. I don't want you to replace her or give me what I lost. I just want you, Claire, exactly as you are, with your frozen eggs and your complicated medical history and your fear of being left and all of it. I want you. She stood up, pacing now, arms still wrapped tight around herself. The men who proposed before, they said the same things. They said they didn't care about the infertility. They said they loved me anyway. And then reality set in and they left. I know, I said. And I can't promise you I'm perfect. I can't promise I won't make mistakes or hurt you sometimes because I'm human and humans fail each other. But I can promise you this. I will never leave you because of the cancer. I will never leave you because of the infertility. I will never leave you because you think you're too complicated or too broken or too much. I stood too, walked to where she was standing. The only way I'm leaving is if you ask me to. And even then, I'll be next door, watering your plants and leaving groceries outside your door and hoping you change your mind. Claire looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I'm scared. I know. I'm scared of believing you and being wrong again. I know. I'm scared of wanting this and losing it. I know, I said again. But Claire, what if you're right? What if I mean every word? What if I'm the person who stays? Are you going to let fear steal that from you? She didn't answer, just stood there crying while I waited. Then, quietly, your wife? Would she be okay with this? With you loving someone else? Sarah made me promise something before she died, I said. She made me promise I wouldn't spend the rest of my life alone. She said grief was okay, but isolation wasn't. She said I was too good at caring for people to stop just because she was gone. I reached out slowly, gave Claire time to pull away, and when she didn't, I took her hand. So yes, Sarah would be okay with this. She'd probably tell me I was an idiot for waiting 18 months to say something. Claire laughed through her tears. I've been avoiding you too. Every time you showed up in the hallway, I wanted to talk to you more, and I forced myself to keep it short because I was afraid of getting attached to another man who'd eventually leave. So we're both idiots, I said. Apparently. We stood there, hands connected, and I felt her thumb brush across my knuckles. A small gesture, but it felt monumental. I need time, she finally said. I can't just say yes to marrying you right now. I need to learn to trust this, trust you, trust that you're not going to wake up one day and realize I'm too complicated. Take all the time you need, I said. I'm not going anywhere. And I need you to be honest with me, she continued. No more secrets, no more protecting me from things you think I can't handle. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Deal. She looked at our joined hands, then back at my face. Can we start over? Can we go back to being neighbors who have coffee and talk and maybe slowly figure out if this thing between us is real? We can do whatever you want, I said. But Claire, I already know it's real. I've known for 18 months. She smiled then, small, fragile, but genuine. Then give me time to catch up. 6 months later, Claire said yes, not to marriage, not yet, but to dating, to trying, to letting me take her to dinner and hold her hand and kiss her goodnight outside her apartment door, to believing, slowly, that maybe I was different, that maybe I was staying. A year after that, I proposed again, properly this time, with a ring and a plan and a speech I'd practiced, and she said yes. Actually said yes, cried and laughed and said yes. We got married in a small ceremony with her students as flower girls and my co-workers as witnesses. Patricia came, still skeptical, but trying. And I promised Claire, in front of everyone who mattered, that I was choosing her. Every day, for the rest of my life. We haven't had children yet. Maybe we will through surrogacy. Maybe we'll adopt. Maybe we'll foster. Maybe we'll pour our love into her students and my patients and build a different kind of family. But none of that matters as much as this. My neighbor told me no one wanted to marry her. I said, I do. She ran, and I waited, and she came back, and we built something real from all that fear and pain and loss. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running and let someone love you anyway. Have you ever been too afraid to accept love because you didn't think you deserved it? Have you ever let fear of being hurt again stop you from taking a chance on someone who wanted to stay? Drop your story in the comments below, because sometimes the person you're running from is exactly the person you need. And if this story reminded you that being broken doesn't make you unlovable, that surviving makes you stronger, that love after loss is possible, hit that notification bell. Because everyone deserves to know that the things we think make us unmarriageable might be exactly what makes us worth choosing.